If you have never worked in corporate, you might think it is the big things that decide your future. It is not. It is a line at the bottom of a slide, prepared by... My name is Noah. I am 36, and for most of my career, I have been the kind of person nobody notices until something breaks. Senior data and sourcing analyst at a global tech company, which is a fancy way of saying I live inside spreadsheets while other people live inside PowerPoints. For years, that was our unspoken deal. I built the numbers. My director, Ethan, showed up in a suit and turned those numbers into our vision. He talked. I backed him up when anyone asked a hard question. I did not hate it. At first, it even felt fair. He would lean over my desk with his coffee and say things like, "Look, you're the brain, I'm the face. They don't listen to guys at your level in that room, but they'll listen to me. We win together." And because he said we a lot, I convinced myself that we included me. The project that changed everything started as a line item in a boring planning meeting. "Vendor spend is out of control," the CFO said. "We're paying 4 companies for nearly identical services. We need a consolidation plan on my desk by the end of the quarter." Ethan nodded like he had been waiting his whole life to hear that sentence. "We've got something cooking already," he said. "My team's been exploring scenarios. I'll have a proposal ready." My team was me and one junior analyst who had been here for 3 months. After the meeting, Ethan dropped a thick folder on my desk. "Here we go, hero," he said. "Vendor consolidation, this is our shot. I want to walk into that exec room with a number big enough to make them shut up and listen." "What kind of number?" I asked. He smiled. "North of 5 million, over 18 months. Clean, simple, defensible. Think you can get us there?" That was the moment I should have asked him something like, "And what happens if I do?" Or, "Where do I show up in that room?" Instead, I said what I always said. "I'll see what the data says." The next 8 weeks were a blur of vendor calls, contract reviews, and scenarios that started to feel like chess problems, played with other people's jobs. I spoke with account managers in 3 time zones, operations leads who had battle scars from previous cost-saving initiatives, and regional managers who did not trust head office as far as they could throw it. On paper, it was simple. Move most of our volume to the one vendor who offered a steep discount in exchange for exclusivity. In reality, that vendor had had outages in 2 of our most critical markets, and their SLA penalties were written by someone who clearly assumed clients did not read the fine print. I read everything. I built a model that did what Ethan wanted. $6.7 million in projected savings over 18 months. But it only held together if we didn't get greedy. We had to. Keep a portion of volume with a second vendor as a safety net, stagger the migration in 3 waves, and accept that some savings would come later instead of immediately. If we tried to speed it up just to make a slide look prettier, the risk curve spiked. I documented all of it. Every assumption, every risk, every "this number" works only if. By the end, the Excel file was almost alive. Comments, color-coded cells, version history, vendor call notes. My initials were everywhere, not because I needed to see them, but because future me knew someone would eventually ask, "Who decided this?" And I wanted to be able to say, "I did for these reasons." When the model finally balanced without line, I sat back and stared at the total. $6,732 over 18 months. Ethan walked by just as I was saving. "Please tell me that is what I think it is," he said. "It's a scenario that works," I replied, "with conditions." "Conditions we can manage?" he asked. "If we do it properly," I said. "We can't just flip a switch and pretend there's no risk. We keep a backup vendor, phase it in slowly, and we're honest about the SLA exposure." He clapped a hand on my shoulder a little too hard. "Noah, you are a machine," he said. "Send me the deck as soon as you've built it. Exec-facing, clean, minimal text. They don't need to see every caveat." "They do, if we're asking them to sign off on this," I said. "They need the story," he corrected. "I'll handle the story. You handle the math." That was our divide. Right there, in one sentence. Still, I built the deck. Title slide, current state analysis, problem statement. Then the hero slide, the one with the 6.7 number and the phase migration graphic. My junior analyst had stayed late to perfect. In the bottom right corner, in small, neat text, I wrote, prepared by Noah Reed, Senior Analyst, Strategic Sourcing. Not because I expected applause, because in my world, ownership is not vanity, it is accountability. Late that night, after most people had gone home, I walked the deck over to Ethan's office on a flash drive. His light was still on. He lived for these moments. He opened the file, scrolled through, whistled softly when he hit the 6.7 matter slide. This is it, he said. This is the one that gets us out of the cost-cutting doghouse. He clicked back to the first slide, then forward again, talking out loud as he imagined the executive room. At this point, CEO leans in. CFO asks about assumptions. COO grunts about risk. He smiled. I'll keep it tight. They'll eat it up. He sounded like an actor running lines. You'll be in the room? I asked. He hesitated just long enough for me to notice. Maybe, he said. Depends how many seats we get. Worst case, I'll have you on standby. If they want to go deep, I'll pull you in. Okay, I said, carefully neutral. He kept scrolling and paused at the footer. Prepared by Noah Reed, he read aloud. You're really into these footers, huh? It's standard in most analytics teams, I said. Whoever built the model signs it. For traceability. He laughed. You and your traceability. Don't worry. Everyone knows you're my numbers guy. I did not argue. On my way back to my desk, I passed by the glass wall of the CFO's office. Her light was still on too. She was staring at two screens, both filled with numbers, looking like someone who trusted data more than charisma. For the first time, I wondered what would happen if she ever saw my version before Ethan's. I pushed the thought away. That was not how the hierarchy worked. There was a chain of command. I was several links down. I was supposed to be grateful my director sold my work upstairs. Still, when I got back to my desk, I did something small. I saved a second copy of the deck in the project folder under a different name. Vendor Consolidation. Proposal. Betrayals PPTX. I opened the file properties and typed my name into the author field. Then I exported the 6.7-minute slide as a PDF and emailed it to myself. Personal address, subject line, for records. I told myself it was just good practice, good documentation. At the time, it didn't feel like preparation for anything. It felt like putting my initials in the corner of a painting I knew I'd never be allowed to hang myself. 2 days later, I found out what Ethan had done with that painting, and how easily a 3-word line, prepared by Noah, could disappear when the room got big enough. The first warning came quietly. A calendar invite. No explanation, no message, no context. Just a title. Vendor Consolidation. Executive Review. Organizer Ethan Shaw. Attendees. CEO, CFO, COO, 2 VPs, and Ethan. My name wasn't there. I refreshed the screen twice, as if the system might apologize and fix itself. Nothing. At first I told myself it was a mistake, that he'd add me later, that maybe the room was too small, or they wanted department heads only. Logic, corporate logic, the same logic that had kept me from asking uncomfortable questions for years. Then I clicked the attachment, a PowerPoint file, vendor consolidation, proposal, final ES, PAPTX ES, Ethan Shaw, not my version, not V3 NR. I opened it, slide 1, clean, polished. My layout, but with a different accent color, his usual shade of blue. Slide 2, problem statement, written in his tone, with phrases he liked to use. Slide 3, strategy overview. Slide 4, the 6.7-inch slide, my numbers, my model, my graphic. But the bottom right corner, the one with the line I'd added so carefully, was empty. The footer was gone, not replaced, not edited, just removed. Prepared by had vanished like it had never been there at all. He hadn't even left a space. and the end of the deck, where I had included a detailed risk appendix, vendor emails, SLA notes, was stripped down to 2 slides of vague bullet points that danced around the real exposure like it was radioactive. He had taken the ceiling number and shaved off everything that made it realistic, everything that made it honest. Anger didn't hit me. Not yet. What hit me was the smallest, coldest thought. He didn't hesitate. He didn't even consider leaving my name there. He never intended to. I scrolled up again. Presented by Ethan Shaw, Director of Strategic Sourcing. Of course, he had dressed my work in his title and walked it into a room I wasn't allowed to enter. I sat back in my chair and let the screen blur. For years, Ethan had told me, titles matter. I'll get you credit. People at your level don't get seats in that room. But this wasn't titles. This was theft dressed as procedure. For the first time, I let myself admit a quiet truth. He wasn't mentoring me. He was farming me. He fed off my work, off my late nights, off the fact that I didn't complain, didn't push, didn't ask to be seen. I was the perfect ghostwriter for his career. Until now, this was too big. 6.7 million wasn't a small win. It was a number executives remembered. A number that put careers on fast tracks. And I knew exactly how this would play out if I stayed silent. He'd get praised. He'd get invited to strategic conversations. He'd get the next promotion. And somewhere down the line, when a risk he'd erased exploded, I'd be the name they dragged into a conference room at 7 a.m. Why didn't you model this correctly? Because I did, but the version they'd see would be his. I closed the file and stared at the invite again, my name missing, his name glowing in the organizer field. That was when another thought hit me. Brighter, sharper. If the CFO saw his version without my appendix, she'd assume the model was shallow. If she saw mine, she'd see the truth. That wasn't sabotage. That was accuracy. So I opened my own deck, V3NR, exported it as PDF, attached the Excel model with full version history, and sent a single email to the CFO's project alias. Subject: model detail and full assumptions, vendor consolidation. Body: sharing the underlying model in full deck in case you need to review assumptions in advance. Noah Reed. No theatrics. No accusations. Just data going to the person responsible for validating data. After hitting send, I stood up, breathed once, and walked to Ethan's office. He was rehearsing. I could tell by his posture. Shoulders rolled back, hands slicing the air, eyes slightly unfocused like he was already standing in the executive room. Got a second? I asked. Sure, he said, still half in performance mode. What's up? You removed my name from the deck? I said. He blinked, then smiled the way people smile when they're choosing condescension over honesty. Noah, come on, he said. Analyst names don't go on executive slides. It looks messy. Directors present. Analysts support. That's how every company works. That's not why you removed it, I replied quietly. His smile faltered. You think I'm trying to take credit? He asked. Offended? Not because it wasn't true, but because I had said it aloud. I know you are, I said. Not angry, not emotional, just factual. He leaned forward, voice lower, the voice he used when he wanted to sound like a mentor. Listen, if this lands well, and it will, we both win. I'll make sure people know you're my guy. I'll loop you in when it makes sense. My guy, I repeated. Yeah, he said. We're a team. No, I said. A team has 2 people in the room. Something in his expression shifted, a flicker of irritation like a parent embarrassed by a child talking out of turn. Do you really want to die on this hill? He asked. Over a footer? I looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time I saw the truth he'd kept hidden under all the we language. He didn't see me as part of a team. He saw me as a tool. No, I said. I don't want to die on it. I stepped back from his doorway. I'm just finally paying attention to who built it. Ethan scoffed, waved me off, and went back to his computer. Already rehearsing again, already imagining the CEO nodding at his strategy. I walked back to my desk, opened my notebook, and wrote down exactly what he'd said. Not because I planned revenge, because for the first time I understood that I was no longer protecting my job. I was documenting the truth. That afternoon, as office noise thinned and people drifted home, the CFO's assistant walked past my desk. She paused. "You're Noah, right?" "Yes." She nodded once thoughtfully. "The CFO asked who built the original model," she said. "She's reviewing both versions tonight?" "Both." I felt something deep and quiet settle in my chest. Not triumph, not fear, just inevitability. Because I suddenly understood something Ethan hadn't. He hadn't stolen my work. He'd created a comparison. And comparisons in corporate are rarely kind to people who cut corners. That night, I went home early for the first time in weeks. The next morning would decide everything. Executives aren't late by accident. When a meeting starts 10 minutes behind schedule, it means something is already burning somewhere else. As people filed into the conference room, the CEO, the CFO with a thick folder, the COO with 2 coffees, 2 VPs with stiff shoulders, I felt the air shift. I'd been added to the invite 15 minutes before the meeting. No explanation, no message. When I walked in, Ethan's eyes widened the way someone's do when a familiar piece of furniture suddenly stands up and speaks. He leaned toward me as I took a seat against the wall. "Just observe," he whispered. "If they ask you something, keep it high level. Last thing we need is you confusing them with the weeds." I didn't even answer. He wasn't talking to me. He was talking to the version of me he needed. Quiet, invisible, endlessly supportive. That version was gone. The CEO opened the meeting with her usual clipped efficiency. "All right, Ethan, you've been pushing this consolidation proposal. Show us what we're looking at." He stepped to the front like he'd been born there. Slide 1, slide 2. Slide 3. Then he clicked to the 6.7 ant slide, the one that didn't belong to him. "This," he said, "is our projected savings across an 18-month horizon if we consolidate 80% of operations under Vendor B." I watched him closely. He didn't stumble, didn't hesitate, didn't even blink when he used the word "we" like it was seasoning he sprinkled on top of other people's work. But the room wasn't listening the way he thought. The CEO frowned first. Then the COO leaned in. Then the CFO opened her folder, my folder, and slid out a printed copy of the model I had sent. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "Before you continue," she said, "I want to understand the assumptions behind the 6.7 out number. Because the version I reviewed last night included a phased migration and a 20% backup vendor allocation, neither of which appear on this slide." The room shifted. Ethan's smile flickered. "The phased approach was an early draft," he said. "We refined it for clarity. Execs don't need every operational caveat." The CFO didn't look away from him. "Those caveats represent 1.9 months in potential SLA penalties," she said. "They're not decorative." A beat of silence. The CEO turned her head slightly. Not all the way, just enough that the entire room understood she was recalibrating. "Who refined the model?" she asked. "I did," Ethan said too quickly. "Based on team input." Her eyes moved to me. "Noah," she said, "how many versions of this model exist?" "3, I said. "The version I built originally, the version with vendor comments and risk notes, and the version attached to the invite." The COO tapped the table with one finger, a sign people in the company recognized. It meant, "Continue. Do not soften anything." I stayed steady. "In the version I sent to finance," I said, "we maintain a backup vendor to protect critical regions. We migrate in 3 waves. The 6.7 matters savings holds, but only with that timeline. Removing the contingency removes the safety net." The CEO looked back at Ethan. "Why am I hearing this from him and not from you?" He swallowed. "We streamlined it," he said again, voice thinner this time. "I didn't want to overwhelm you with technicalities." The CFO closed the folder. Ethan, she said, I have a question. Did you remove Noah's risk notes before uploading your version? He opened his mouth, then closed it. You could see the calculation flicker across his face, the desperate search for a version of the truth that wouldn't make him look reckless or dishonest. He failed. We needed the story to land, he said. The CEO leaned forward. I am not interested in stories, she said. I am interested in reality. Then she turned to me. Noah, she said, come to the front. My pulse hit hard once, just once, before it steadied. I stood, walked forward, and stopped at the opposite side of the table from Ethan. He looked at me like I'd betrayed him. But I hadn't betrayed him. I had simply stopped protecting him. The CFO slid my printed model toward me. Noah, walk us through how this was built. I did, cleanly, factually, without spinning or softening anything. I explained the vendor's warning about compressed migration, the SLA penalty schedule, the need for a backup vendor, the reason the savings looked bigger on Ethan's version, and why that bigger number was unstable. I did not mention the deleted footer. I did not accuse. I did not editorialize. I didn't have to. The CEOs in rooms like this don't respond to emotion. They respond to discrepancies. And the discrepancy between my version and Ethan's was enormous. Halfway through my explanation, the CEO interrupted Ethan without even looking at him. Sit down, she said. He sat. When I finished, the CFO spoke. I'm not comfortable approving anything based on the slide deck we were sent. I'm comfortable with Noah's version. It's complete. It's documented. It's defensible. The COO nodded once. A slow, heavy nod. The CEO closed her laptop. Ethan, she said, we're pausing your authority to submit proposals without finance review. That sentence wasn't loud, but it was lethal. Then she turned to me. Noah, you'll work with finance to rebuild this deck properly. Your version, with your assumptions, and your name stays on it. I stepped back, letting the weight of her words land where they belonged. When the meeting ended, Ethan hovered near the door, pretending to organize his papers, pretending not to shake. He didn't look at me. He didn't have to, because the truth was already written everywhere he hadn't bothered to erase. In the model properties, in the email thread, in the risk notes he thought executives would never read, and now in the minds of the three people whose opinions actually mattered. He hadn't just failed to take credit from me. He had given them a perfect map of every shortcut he'd taken along the way. The collapse had begun, and none of it required me to raise my voice. The hallway outside the executive room was too quiet. Meetings like that usually end with noise, people debriefing, trading jokes, walking fast to the next fire. Not this time. This time every person left the room in silence, like they were carrying something heavy they didn't want to drop. Ethan was the last to step out. He didn't look at me, didn't speak, didn't even pretend to be on his phone. He walked past like a man trying not to attract attention while the ground under him cracked. I didn't follow. I went back to my desk, opened my laptop, and waited to see which direction the fallout would flow. I didn't have to wait long. 5 minutes later, an email from the CFO landed in my inbox. Subject: Follow-up, Vendor Consolidation Body. Noah, meet in Finance Room C in 20 minutes. Bring your version of the deck and the full model. Room C, the quiet room, the one without windows, the one where real decisions were made. When I walked in, the CFO and COO were already there, reviewing printed pages scattered across the table. Numbers, comments, timestamps, my signature lines. Sit, the CFO said, no small talk. She pointed to the stack of documents. These are your model, your risk notes, your vendor emails, your assumptions, correct? Yes. And these, she said, touching the smaller pile on her left, are the edits Ethan made. She slid the two stacks together. Side by side, they looked like before and after photos of a crime scene. The COO crossed his arms. Noah, he said, If we had approved Ethan's version and the vendor failed to meet SLAs during a compressed migration, what would have happened? The outages in Europe and Ontario would have triggered penalties within the first 3 months, I said. Operations would have escalated, finance would have opened an investigation, and the model would have been blamed. Meaning you? He said. Yes. The CFO tapped her pen 3 times, a habit she had when she was connecting dots. You know why your email mattered? She asked. No. She leaned forward. Because it didn't accuse anyone. It didn't escalate anything. It just showed the truth. And truth, in this company, eventually finds oxygen. She flipped the page to the appendix. Why did you keep such detailed notes? She asked. Not suspicious, just curious. Because someday someone was going to ask me, why did this happen? And I never want the answer to be, I don't remember. The COO nodded once. That's how leaders think, he said. The CFO closed the folder. Effective immediately, she said. You're taking ownership of the proposal. Full ownership. Finance and operations will support you. I exhaled, slow and controlled. And Ethan? I asked. The CFO didn't blink. There will be a conversation, corporate translation. We're done here. The COO stood. One more thing, he said. In the meeting earlier, you stayed factual. You didn't editorialize. You didn't take a victory lap. You just explained what was missing. I nodded. That told us everything we needed to know about who built the real model. They left me alone in the room. For the first time since the project started, I could breathe without feeling like someone else was inhaling most of the oxygen. But the day wasn't over, not even close. When I stepped back into the hallway, Ethan was waiting. He looked different. The brittle confidence was gone. His tie hung crooked. His hands were stuffed into his pockets, like he didn't know where to put them. Noah, he said quietly, we need to talk. I didn't sit. I didn't step closer. I just met his eyes. He exhaled sharply. You blindsided me, he said. Why would you send the model to finance? That wasn't your place. It wasn't your place to delete the risk section, I said, or my name. He opened his mouth, then closed it, jaw tightening. You don't understand how these rooms work, he said. You think accuracy matters. It doesn't. Story matters. No, I said. Story matters after accuracy, not instead of it. He snorted, a dry, ugly sound. You think any of them care who built the model? They care who sells it. No, I said again calmly. They care who they can trust. That landed. He straightened, bitterness rising like heat. You really think they'll promote you for this? You're an analyst, a good one. I've always said that. But analysts don't go into those rooms. I didn't smile. I was in the last one. That shook him. A visible stumble. He tried again. Look, we can fix this. We just need to get aligned. If you tell them you overemphasize the risks. I didn't, I said. Or that you sent the deck prematurely. I didn't. Or that the migration timeline was just exploratory. It wasn't. His frustration cracked into anger. Do you have any idea what you just did to my job? I held his gaze. No, I said. You did that. For a second he looked like he might yell. Then the fight left him all at once, like air from a punctured tire. He stepped back. I mentored you, he said quietly. No, I said. You used me, and I let you. That ends today. He stared at me for a long moment, searching for the version of me he could control. He didn't find him. He turned and walked away without another word. That afternoon, I rebuilt the deck with finance and operations. We kept the real assumptions. We kept the risk notes. We kept the timeline that wouldn't break. And on slide 4, in the bottom right corner, we added, prepared by Noah Reed, reviewed by Finance and Operations. Before I left for the day, the COO stopped by my desk. We're presenting the revised version next week, he said. You'll lead it. Me? I asked. You built it, he said. You understand it, and you earned the right to be in the room. I nodded, trying not to let the weight of that sentence show. As he walked away, he said one last thing, the kind of comment that stays with you. Don't worry about Ethan. People who remove names from slides always end up removing themselves from the story. By the time I left the building, the sky was dark, but something inside me was lighter than it had been in years. Not triumph, not revenge, just alignment. For the first time, the work I had done and the name attached to it were the same. And in corporate, that's the closest thing to justice most people ever get. Tomorrow, the consequences would begin. But tonight, finally, the truth was no longer hiding in footnotes. Corporate revenge is rarely cinematic. There's no dramatic confrontation in the rain, no slammed doors, no audience applauding as justice arrives. Real corporate revenge is slow, procedural, and delivered through calendar invites with polite subject lines. The first one hit my inbox 3 days later. Subject, discussion, leadership alignment attendees, CHRO, CFO, COO, Ethan Shaw. I wasn't invited. I didn't need to be. By then, everyone understood exactly what the meeting was about. But none of that was my focus. I was busy rebuilding the proposal. Properly this time. In the week after the reckoning, I worked with finance and operations every day, reconciling assumptions, adjusting risk windows, confirming implementation timelines, validating vendor commitments. We built a version that wasn't a story. It was a roadmap. When the final deck was done, the CFO emailed me, "You're leading the executive presentation. Prepare accordingly." I stared at that line longer than I should have. For years I had watched directors take my models into these rooms. Like trophies they had carved themselves. Now I was the one they trusted with the room. The morning of the presentation, the CEO met me outside the conference room. "Noah," she said, "present only what's true, and don't worry about impressing anyone. Just tell us what's real." I nodded once. That had always been the easiest part. The presentation itself was simple in the way truth is simple. 3-wave migration. Backup vendor for 12 months. 4.9 melters, real savings. SLA risk contained. Transparent assumptions, no theatrics, no inflated numbers, no vanishing footnotes. When I finished, the CEO didn't look at the slides. She looked at me. "Thank you," she said. "Clarity matters, consistency matters, integrity matters. We need more of that in this room." The board approved the proposal unanimously. Afterward, the CFO pulled me aside. "Good work," she said. "By the way, check HR's site later today." She walked off before I could respond. I didn't check immediately. I let the day unfold. By late afternoon, whispers started moving across the floor. People glancing at screens, people stopping mid-email, a few hushed conversations near the kitchen. At 4:11 p.m., an announcement popped up on the internal portal. Organizational update, strategic sourcing. I clicked. Effective immediately, Ethan Shaw is no longer with the company. We thank him for his contributions and wish him success in his future endeavors. No drama, no spectacle, just 8 lines of polite corporate language, the kind that sounds neutral but tastes like a verdict. I leaned back in my chair, not smiling, not gloating, just breathing. People asked me later if I felt vindicated, if I celebrated, if I felt triumphant. But the truth is far quieter. I felt accurate. For years I had been working in the shadows of other people's presentations. The unseen name behind the numbers everyone else claimed credit for. And all that time I thought that was normal. That it was how things worked. It wasn't. The next week, the COO called me into his office. "Noah," he said, "let's talk about where you fit long term." I expected a polite thank you, maybe a bonus, maybe nothing. Instead, he slid a printed document across the table. Senior manager, business analysis, strategy group, a promotion, a salary bump, a seat at the table I had been building from the hallway for years. "You're here," he said, "because you didn't sell us a number. You showed us the truth. And we need people like that. if we're going to fix the way this company operates. I signed without hesitation. On my way out, he added, "By the way, make sure every deck you build going forward has your name on it. Not for credit, for accountability." I smiled then. The real kind. The kind that comes from alignment between effort and recognition. That evening, after everyone else left, I stayed behind for a moment. I walked past my old desk, the place where I had built models no one saw, and written footnotes no one read. Someone else worked there now. They had a photo of their dog on the monitor. I hoped their director respected them. At my new desk, a quiet corner with space to think, I opened the final version of the consolidation deck. Slide 4, bottom right corner, prepared by Noah Reed, reviewed by Finance and Operations. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't bold, it wasn't a victory banner, but it was mine. My work, my name, my responsibility, my integrity. People think revenge is fire, anger, explosion, but this wasn't revenge. This was correction. This was the universe, or the org chart, straightening itself after too much weight had been placed on the wrong shoulders. When I left the building that night, the air felt cleaner, because the truth had finally been allowed in, and everything that happened after, every consequence, every departure, every promotion, wasn't a punishment. It was balance. They stole my presentation. They erased my name. But in the end, the truth stayed exactly where it belonged. In the footer, under the work, next to the only name that had ever been real.